Well, folks, I think it's finally time we talk about the RTX 5090. This is a Halo product from NVIDIA. It's the most powerful GPU in the world. This video is part 1 of a 3-part series I'm doing on the 5090. Part 1 will be all about the experience of the 5090 from a more typical gamery perspective. I really want to lay out my personal experience and findings for you guys, all whilst conveying the feeling that no compromises hardware brings to the table. Part 2 will be all about using the RTX 5090 locally with large language models. Most of this is also recorded by now, so it shouldn't be too much longer before you guys get to see part 2. And finally, part 3 will be all about creating visuals locally with the RTX 5090, so think AI video generation, AI imagery, etc. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I've never made a GPU review before, so I'm kind of approaching it in a unique way. There are already countless reviews of the RTX 5090, and I want to actually leave you with something more than you came with, or something you can't find on other YouTube videos. So let's dive in at Chapter 1. The experience of the 5090. First things first, this is a Halo product. It's the fastest GPU in the world, brought to us by one of the largest companies in the world. It costs a whopping $2,000 for the Founders Edition, and good luck at finding it actually at the $2,000 price. Scalpers are all over the internet. Partner cards are definitely more expensive as well, trying to cool this 600-watt behemoth of a card. But yes, I was able to get my hands on one from the incredible green alien overlords NVIDIA. They sent one out my way before the product was even released. This card has massive implications for local AI, as I'm sure you guys no doubt know. The main factor in that is its VRAM. Most GPUs on the market are going to have anywhere from 6 to 16 gigabytes of VRAM, but this one has a whopping 32 gigabytes of GDDR7 VRAM. So tons of good fast memory, which means local AI applications are going to make great use of this hardware. So I think that's one of the reasons that the Green Overlords chose me to have the GPU and play around and test it out, because I mainly focus on AI content. I've run local AI before. Actually, unboxing the card was a decent experience, not nearly as cool as the previous 40 and 30 series boxes, but honestly, this is computer hardware. I really don't care what the packaging looks like too much, as long as the product works in the way that I expect. It's all like recycled cardboard. It looks really cheap, and it's a super expensive product. Some people were kind of butthurt that the packaging was ugly and garish, but to be honest, I could care less. Upon opening up the box, the first thing I realized is, wow, this is actually a smaller product than I thought it would be. The previous RTX 40 series was quite big, physically large. You see, at the time of retrieval, my current GPU was the RTX 4080, a big, heavy 3-slot card. This newer RTX 5090 was only a 2-slot card. I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but the way NVIDIA was actually able to achieve this smaller card design whilst drawing more power and creating more heat is because the actual die and the board is in the center. So most of the card physically is just a cooler. It's not your typical PCB, it's directly in the center. So the cooling is more efficient, it blows through the entire card and dumps plenty of hot air on your CPU. Physically, the card also uses a different power connector design than RTX 40 and 30 series, at least in relation to the Founders Edition cards. I know there is a ton of controversy surrounding melting cables with those older series and connectors just having too much stress on them, and NVIDIA has largely solved this by making a 45-degree angled connector. And no complaints for me in regards to this connector. It works fine, and I have yet to see any issues with it. Now, as I previously mentioned, my computer had an RTX 4080 in it. I actually recently upgraded my entire computer rig, which means, oh hey, you know, you got the recent technology in your computer, you should just be able to put that RTX 5090 right in. Actually, nope, that's not the case. You see, I did upgrade my computer. A new motherboard, a new CPU, new RAM, I mean the whole 9 yards. But I didn't upgrade my power supply. In fact, I have had the same power supply for years and years and years, ever since I built my first computer, an EVGA 850 watt power supply. But this new RTX 5090 draws 600 watts, or up to 600 watts of power. So the total system is not going to cut it at 850 watts, not even close. The minimum recommendation is an 1000 watt power supply, but I went with the classic 80% rule and got a 1200 watt PSU from Best Buy last minute on the same day. So after a little computer surgery, I had the new GPU in, I had the RTX 5090 in, got my drivers from NVIDIA, and man, is it ever cool to have this Halo product, the most powerful graphics card in the world in my machine. If you want to know the honest truth, the first game I tested was Minecraft. I've been playing a ton of Minecraft lately with a custom mod pack. I think something that you guys are going to learn about me over the course of this review is that I like to have my cake and eat it too. You see, I don't just want to play regular vanilla Minecraft. I want to play Minecraft with 200 mods. I want it to run at a high refresh rate. I want graphics mods. I want animation mods. I want shaders. I want to see what's really possible with the technology we have been provided. This review isn't really all about benchmarks. It's more about my experience as a high-level consumer who's just insane about technology and seeing what's actually possible. How high fidelity can I make my experience? Honestly, if there's anything I've learned about Minecraft over the years is that you can pack this sucker full of enough mods and tweaks to bring any system down to its knees. In some situations, I'm only getting like 50 FPS, maybe even down to 45, 43 FPS at the very lowest, because I've just got these insane animations and 200 villagers living in my basement. You know, that's just Minecraft. We've also got shaders on, which definitely tax the GPU quite a bit. But you know what? I'll be damned if the game doesn't look downright beautiful, and the experience truly is sublime. This would not be possible without the RTX 5090, especially at a high frame rate like you're seeing. It would not be possible without a monster CPU, crunching chunks in the background, as well as handling all these random mods. This is the type of experience that young Matt would have dreamed of. It wouldn't have been possible when I was a kid, and like I said, I'm still able to use Minecraft to bring my system to its very knees, because this game's just got so much going on. So at the end of the day, Minecraft's performance was very much dynamic. It depends on what you're doing, it depends on what mods are active or what shaders you're using, but I can't say that most of the time the experience is very pleasant. My monitor is only 1440p, but it does have a 240 Hz refresh rate, which is difficult for a lot of titles to meet. So I wasn't able to get Minecraft to run at 240 frames per second without either tweaking certain settings or using applications such as lossless scaling to double the frame rate. It really is worth mentioning that Minecraft isn't well optimized already. It's not really using the computer to its most efficient, best capabilities. Really, the point of this is, can we use this new hardware to create a Minecraft experience that younger me would have drooled over? The answer is absolutely yes. If little Matt had access to this as a kid, he would be beside himself at the level of fidelity, the quality, and especially the frame rate. When I was a kid, I could barely play Minecraft at 30 FPS, let alone well past 60 and 100, especially with all these mods and shaders. The next game I tested out was Red Dead Redemption 2. This Rockstar title is one of the best games I've ever played in my life, and it's also one of the best looking games I've ever played in my life. And this game came out all the way back in 2018, almost, what, 7 years ago now since this game has released, and it still holds up graphically today. It looks better than most titles, actually. Rockstar built a breathtaking world, beautiful scenery. Taking a look at the settings here, you can see I've got this game maxed out. No bars held back. I went through everything, and that's going to be true for pretty much every title we look at today. Everything is going to be optimized for the best graphics physically possible, so we're not using any DLSS upscaling here. We're actually increasing the resolution past what my monitor is capable of, 1.5x, so not exactly 4K, but it's definitely a little bit higher than 1440p. And I think it gives this game the best visual quality physically possible with my setup. And you can see the frame rate is really solid. We're looking at anywhere from about 120 to 160 FPS on average. So we're really close to a rock solid 144 FPS here with settings that are honestly probably a little bit overkill. If I wanted, I could lower a few settings and get that rock solid 240 FPS, and I bet the game would still look gorgeous. Our frame times are also looking super stable, anywhere from 6 to 8 milliseconds, and really, there isn't a lot of hitching unless you go into the map or something like that. And you'll also notice it's making good use of the GPU here, pulling about 450 to 500 watts of power. Just absurd. Maxing your games out with the RTX 5090 might actually mean a higher electricity bill, something genuinely noticeable, which is totally crazy. It's pushing the system pretty hard, and you can see in the clips here that my GPU temps are slowly climbing, this being the first modern game that's really pushing this GPU. Originally, this game was released on consoles with a frame cap of about 30 FPS. Playing this game at well over 4 times that frame rate, entirely maxed out, just makes my little gamer heart warm inside. Now, you'll also notice that the game is using about 9 gigabytes, 8.5 gigabytes of VRAM, and that is only 25%, just a quarter of the total VRAM this card has to offer. Theoretically, you could run 4 instances of this off just one GPU, and then that would max out the VRAM of the card. But don't worry, we're gonna max it out later. Moving onwards, let's talk about Planet Coaster 2. Yes, I do play tycoon games. Am I good at them? Absolutely not. My park is a complete disaster. You can see it mostly consists of a huge pool construct that defies all of the laws of physics, and I've also placed all kinds of different rides and vending machines and shops across the entire park. I think you guys should come for a quick tour of this place. Obviously, the main attraction is going to be the massive pool complex. You can see people literally whizzing around in clear tubes right next to you while you're walking around the park. They will eventually be deposited back into the main complex as well, probably landing on their friends. As I mentioned, we also don't take safety very seriously. This lifeguard is quite literally useless. I mean, how's he helping anyone? Seriously. Here is our Soda Lightful sponsored injury pool with 5 different slides leading into it. We've also got heavy machinery right where people are walking. Somehow they're not bothered by it. No one leaves here without needing ankle surgery. Don't worry, we've got another pool that might actually be worse. As you can see, it's a lot smaller, it's overcrowded, and one of these slides definitely has the ability to catapult you right to the concrete, missing the pool entirely. But don't forget about our fantastic lazy river. Here, I'll show you how you get into it. First, take a ride on the garbage disposal ride. It'll drop you right off into the entrance to the lazy river, totally against your will. Start swimming though, you don't want to get your head clobbered off by some fool who also took the same ride as you. Next, you gotta tragically swim through a massive group of people who have no idea where they are or where they were just dropped off. Keep swimming, eventually you'll find a ledge to climb up onto, and maybe you'll find your parents one day. In all seriousness though, we really do have to talk about the performance figures this game provides. We're only drawing about 230 watts right now. The GPU is pretty chilly at like 54 degrees Celsius or so. Something is not right. The game clearly is not pushing this computer to its maximum capability to deliver frames. There's some bottleneck somewhere. It could be CPU related, especially considering the fact that my park has 5,000 people. 5,000 individuals inside the park. The game maxes out at 6K, and you have to change the settings to even allow it to go past 4,000. But yeah, we've got this game maxed all the way out as well. We are using DLSS, but not to upscale. We're using it just as anti-aliasing, and I will say we also are using frame generation, so I'll compare the performance in this particular title with frame gen on and frame gen off, because I know it's a hot topic surrounding DLSS 4 and the release of the 50 series GPUs. When I have this game fully maxed out inside of my insane park, I'm getting like 45 to 50 FPS on average. not great. But like I said, I mean, you can see this GPU is being used at maybe 40% of its capacity at the most. There's a clear bottleneck somewhere in this software. Turning frame gen on, though, does boost our frame rates up, and now I get, anywhere between 80 and 100 FPS in this busy park. It feels super playable. This is a tycoon game. I don't need crazy good reaction times. I just want a smooth experience in my evil disaster park. What's really cool to me is that both DLSS and frame generation use AI technologies to make your games a theoretical better experience, right? And that's a really cool idea that I wholeheartedly support. I mean, look at my channel, right? But there's so much controversy because it's not real performance from the hardware. But is that really true? It's not really pushing those frames in the traditional sense. It's using other technologies to literally conjure new frames for you. Or in the case of DLSS, run the game at a lower resolution and then upscale it. In this case, though, we're not doing that. We're using DLSS just for the anti-aliasing. I grew up playing games at 30 FPS on consoles through a television that already had input lag. When I got into PC gaming, I was trying to use a laptop which basically couldn't run anything. The fact that these technologies are even an option now, to me, is a fantastic thing. I don't care if some frames are fake. I don't care if we're using AI to upscale our games. The fact that kids these days can actually enjoy their games at a reasonable frame rate and have a smooth experience means that things are getting a lot better for gamers who don't have all of the money in the world to spend on hardware. And these technologies, I mean, if you really don't like them, you can always turn them off. A larger part of the DLSS and frame generation controversy is that NVIDIA used benchmarks with these technologies on to show off the performance of their hardware. Is it raw rasterized performance from the cards? The answer is no, but at least there is a disclaimer in their advertising. I imagine there would be actual legal consequences if that wasn't the case. And you might say, hey, it's not the real performance of the card, but it kind of is. No, not in the traditional sense, but is it delivering higher frame rates? Yes. And if your computer is already especially pushing the game up to 60 FPS, let's say, doubling that to 120, with the only downside being, well, maybe you're gonna get a little bit of input lag, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. This is not the only game that I use the frame gen technology with. I get some of you guys probably don't like the idea behind it and don't like the fact that NVIDIA tried to use it to advertise. But to me, this technology is a miracle of artificial intelligence, and I can genuinely say that I like my experience more when I use it. I'm not a competitive gamer, and I prefer the smoothness factor, even if it has a couple milliseconds delay. While DLSS and FrameGen is amazing, I do think that it can incentivize game developers to create games that don't perform as well without them. I'm a firm believer that devs should optimize their games to work the best that they can. There are still plenty of people running 1000 series NVIDIA GPUs in their computers, and those just don't support these new technologies. A well-optimized game is better for everybody all the way around. We don't want to rely on DLSS or FrameGen to be band-aids to improve performance after the fact. And speaking of older hardware, I really don't like the fact that NVIDIA will oftentimes lock down new technology like DLSS 4 or FrameGen to certain cards. If older cards can run the technology, I really think NVIDIA should be supporting them. Honestly, in my perfect world, NVIDIA would make DLSS and FrameGen open source technologies, so consumers with AMD hardware could also potentially benefit, let's say. But obviously, from NVIDIA's perspective, they're just going to lose money if they do that, so I don't think they'll ever release it open source. Moving on to BeamNG Drive, this is the Vulkan variant. This game actually doesn't use any fancy new performance technology like FrameGen or DLSS 4, so we're just looking at raw rasterization here. And what is happening to the on-screen stats? I don't know, guys. Honestly, this freaky voodoo stuff would just not go away no matter what I did, so I'm sorry, you have to deal with it. For those unaware, this is basically an automotive simulator with very realistic soft body physics. It's one of my favorite titles, and the footage you're seeing now has about 200 mods loaded in with this game. All the testing I did for this game was without any traffic loaded in. You could bring down your frame rate quite significantly by introducing traffic, but without it and just driving around, we're getting delivering stellar performance most of the time, maintaining frame rates above the 200 mark, although it can really depend on what exactly you're doing. Overall, it's slicker than butter on my 240Hz monitor with G-Sync enabled. This is without a doubt a solid bump also over my RTX 4080, but to be completely fair, that card also ran the game quite well. Not at my monitor's max refresh rate though. A lot of you might say, hey, I don't think that I could even be able to tell the difference between 120Hz and 240Hz, but once you get used to it, the trained eye can notice it well. Absolutely a smoother experience, and I am happy with it. In terms of pushing the GPU, this title drew anywhere from 350 to 450 watts. Again, it's not pushing the card to its maximum output, but it was still able to heat it up to a pretty steamy 76 degrees max temp Celsius. Even in titles with no ray tracing at all, pulling like 60 to 70% of the card's max wattage can heat this sucker up. It's not surprising considering it's a 2-slot card, but it is a little bit worrying considering we are going to get to some games later that do draw that maximum wattage. Moving forward, let's chat about everyone's favorite game to benchmark, Cyberpunk 2077. This is one of the first titles to support the brand new DLSS 4.0 and multi-frame generation, so you bet we're going to talk about that. I gotta be honest, I have a bad history with this game. I was one of the absolute fools who pre-ordered it, and it was just a disaster at launch. If you guys remember, I originally tried to play this on my RTX 2080 Super, and I had ray tracing issues while trying to use it. It's definitely been updated since then, and they fixed a lot of the problems the game had. So the experience on RTX 5090 is just nothing short of remarkable at this point. I have the game running, again, fully maxed out with ray tracing on Psycho, and even without any frame generation, we're definitely in the playable territory. Again, using the brand new DLSS 4.0 at maximum resolution just for anti-aliasing. The graphics and lighting are just stonkingly impressive. This is one of the few titles I own that actually utilize the ray tracing capability of the NVIDIA GPUs. For this game, turning it on genuinely makes a difference. My RTX 4080 didn't handle this game as well, and it definitely shows on first boot. I could crank all the settings up on the 4080, but the frame rates were low enough for it not to be worth the trade-off. 5090 is different though. It's able to pull off the whole show while delivering sensible frame rates, and with multi-frame generation enabled, you can practically choose whatever frame rate you want to target. At first, I tested it at 4x, meaning about 75% of the frames I was seeing whilst playing were entirely AI generated, which is genuinely incredible because it doesn't affect the gameplay as bad as you'd expect. Very much a playable experience, and if you put it in front of someone who only plays games on console, they probably wouldn't complain at all. Switching it on and off will absolutely reveal a slight delay though, especially at that 4x generation mark, and quick movements of the camera will result in a ton of motion blur, absolutely more than with it off. Now, this is actually something very important I want to bring up with frame generation, because it does highlight a downside of frame generation that you might want to accommodate for if you plan on using it. To explain this using Cyberpunk 2077 at 4x multi-frame generation, as the GPU produces the 25% of natural frames, it creates the effect of motion blur targeted for that specific frame rate. In most games that use motion blur, the amount of blur you see on the screen is actually determined by the frame rate. So if we were to lock the frame rate to 30, let's say, you would see, quote unquote, more motion blur because you're looking at fewer frames, thus whipping the camera around will create a more dramatic motion blur effect. But when you achieve a higher frame rate more quote-unquote naturally, this motion blur effect will naturally be reduced. If you're using frame generation, this is not the case. This specific scenario, we're generating about 45 to 60 natural frames, so the game is creating motion blur at that level. And when multi-frame generation creates that extra 150 frames or so, it creates those frames at the 50 FPS motion blur level. And on top top of this, the generated frames are also blurrier than the natural ones. To explain how this feels when you're actually playing the game yourself, it's really only a problem when you're moving and whipping the camera around quickly. This issue can really easily be accounted for by adjusting the motion blur settings in whatever title you're playing. You can either lower the motion blur down or just turn it off entirely. Definitely something to think about though when using frame generation, especially if you want to have a less blurry experience. For me personally, after messing with all the settings for a bit, I settled on 3x frame generation. It gives me around 144 Hz gameplay with everything maxed out, and it's super solid. Don't get me wrong, the delay is definitely still there, but I forget about it pretty quickly enough. Definitely not bad enough to affect combat, and this game is single player. To be completely honest, the idea that my gaming skills are good enough for frame gen delay to compromise my abilities is just laughable. I am terrible at playing video games. Keep in mind, I grew up playing most of my games at 30 FPS, and this is leagues above that, and then some. It's smooth, the game looks gorgeous, and it really felt like a no compromises experience. Switching it on and off, you'll definitely be able to tell, but after a while, you get pretty used to it, and you can just enjoy that ultra smooth, gorgeous gameplay. So far in our examples, we haven't seen this GPU pushed to its very limits, but Sea of Thieves, with the correct settings, has the ability to pull as much wattage from the card as it could hope to handle. First off, I tested the game how I'd actually be playing it. So settings are all completely maxed out, the resolution scale is bumped up to I think 125 or 150%, and with these settings we're pulling around 380 to 450 watts. That's quite a lot, and the temperature is sitting around 70 to 74 degrees Celsius, which is pretty steamy, not gonna lie. But hey, look at that frame rate, we're pulling well over 200 FPS here, settling around my monitor's refresh rate at about 240. So this is a fantastic experience in-game. It's very smooth, the frame times are stable, super high frame rate as well, with decent graphics. But we're here to push the card to its very limits. Now, if we set the resolution scale all the way up to 250%, which equates to just a touch over 4K, we can really push this GPU to its absolute limits. Immediately, once doing this, we notice a jump in wattage and temperature. We're now pulling a whopping 500 to 550 watts, the maximum TDP of this GPU. Temps instantly jump over 80 degrees Celsius, settling around an 86 degree maximum. This is definitely getting pretty hot, pulling this much power, and I think a lot of people would say that they're pretty uncomfortable with the GPU at this temperature. But what does the GPU have to say? Well, it actually begins to thermal throttle just a little bit. It pulls a little bit of clock speed out, only about 120 megahertz or so, and still, under this much stress, the GPU is delivering a solid frame rate, well over 120 FPS in most cases, so consider me impressed. To be honest, 500 plus watts on a 2-slot card is pretty incredible as is. I get this GPU is still pretty big, but it's crazy how much heat is getting pumped out of this sucker. A lot of you probably are saying, hey, those temperatures are concerning. I mean, 86 degrees? And yeah, I'd have to agree with you. We're getting almost into the 90s territory. No doubt in my mind, this card is going to run hot. You're going to want a good case. You're going to want good cooling. This is a premium product that demands premium cooling and treatment. Now, I'd feel like I'd be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't go over some of the serious shortcomings of this product. Don't get me wrong, it does stand in its own right as the current king of consumer GPUs, but we have to discuss the reality of this product's launch and actually getting your hands on one. Now, the RTX 5090's MSRP of $1,999 marks a $400 increase over the RTX 4090. Many reviews have already highlighted the fact that this price hike might not be justified for all users, especially given that third-party models can exceed over $3,000 MSRP. But like I mentioned in the beginning of this review, it's going to be a long time before you can even get your hands on a 5090 at any MSRP price. Not only is the card arguably pricey regarding its own MSRP, but it's even more inflated due to extremely poor availability. Both limited supplies from NVIDIA and scalpers buying that limited supply up to hike the price on eBay have decimated the chance for real consumers to get their hands on this product. For many, older 40 series cards or even offerings from AMD might offer better value at the end of the day. It makes it really difficult to recommend this card to anyone but extreme prosumers that want the best, or people that are looking into AI workloads, for example, which again, we're going to talk about in the later videos. Now, the card's power draw up to 550 watts really is a significant concern. It's nearing the 600 watt limit of the power connector. You saw temperatures can reach pretty deep into the 80s, at least in my setup here. Not only will this affect your electricity bill, but you'll need a power supply capable of providing the GPU with the power it needs. It's also sort of a safety concern. Although my system has been fine, I've seen too many folks online sharing some scary temperatures near the power connector. It's not to be taken lightly, and it's definitely something to think about when you're setting your rig up to work with an RTX 5090. Now, post-launch, significant driver issues have also surfaced. I haven't experienced anything too bad except for the occasional crash in a couple of games, but reports from videocards.com and PC World detail cards becoming unresponsive or bricked after updating to the 572.16 driver. NVIDIA is currently investigating all this with temporary fixes, including switching to PCIe 4.0 or lowering your monitor's refresh rates, but these issues highlight the early software maturity concerns we have surrounding this product. Classically, NVIDIA has pretty great drivers out of the gate, but I have a feeling that some things might have slipped through the cracks in early testing because it's not easy to get products like this out the door so quickly. And with AI being such a growing field in the tech space right now, and a lot of NVIDIA's focus being put towards that, I feel like this 50 series launch suffered a little bit, especially in terms of driver stability. But it also gets worse. There are also hardware issues surfacing, missing ROPS, render output units. Now, this issue only affects less than 0.5% of RTX 5090 and 5070 Ti cards. At the end of the day, this could lead to a 4 to 5% performance drop in games, with potential impacts up to 10% in more specific use cases. To their credit, NVIDIA offers replacements, but this absolutely underscores the quality assurance issues that NVIDIA has faced getting this card out the door in a timely manner while still focusing on all the crazy things happening in the tech space, such as AI. If you absolutely must, under any circumstances, have the best GPU known to man, then look no further than the RTX 5090. It's gonna play games better than anything else. It's gonna have all the latest features, DLSS 3, multi-frame generation, 32 gigabytes of VRAM. If you're one of those prosumers and you can find one for MSRP, hey, go for it if that's what you really want. So for consumers that are more budget-oriented, meaning most people, it's probably going to be more worth it to get something like this. Here's an RTX 4080. It's still going to be able to play all the latest games, and with DLSS, playing at 4K probably isn't going to be an issue either. As we're ending this video, I do want to mention I am giving a GPU away for NVIDIA GTC. It's going to be an RTX 4080 Super, not this particular GPU. It's in a box back there. But yes, NVIDIA's GTC is going to be from March 17th to the 21st. They will have free online sessions, so if you attend one of those sessions and then fill out my Google form, you can get entered to win the RTX 4080 Super in that box. The sessions are pretty great, lots of stuff on AI, quantum computing, cybersecurity, and a whole bunch of stuff. Someone's gonna win that GPU for free, and you might as well try to win it. Who knows, could be your lucky day, and you could learn something in the process from the free GTC session. Well, that's gonna do it for part 1 of this little RTX 5090 series. Join me next time where we take a look at the capabilities for local AI, particularly LLMs, and then finally moving on to image generation and video generation. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and goodbye.